home, it could be the last time I see my grandma, at least Nai Nai. I could feel her fragility. And so I was just feeling the most of every emotion that I could be feeling at that time. And that was the sort of impetus for this. It was like, I feel so much. There's something here that is able to be translated to an audience. So in that sense, it's because I feel so much with them that it feels like, okay, there's something here. We should explore it.
You have roots in the Bay Area, and because we're presenting this here in San Francisco, I'm curious as well, how does coming from the Bay Area potentially impact either the films you want to make, the stories you want to tell, or your lens at all?
I mean, it's everything. It's everything. I think you don't know the circumstances of your life until you leave, especially your childhood. And I think that was so much of my feature film, which takes place in the Bay Area. We shot it in Fremont, California, where I'm from. And it's this corner of the Bay Area that I sort of felt like hadn't really been spotlit in the sort of canon of Bay Area movies that had been being told. And I was so inspired by all of those. And I sort of realized as I grew older and looked back, Fremont has such a deeply rooted immigrant community and a very large multicultural community. And I grew up around not a bunch of Asian Americans, but a bunch of Asian Americans of different cultures, and even outside of Asian Americans, it was really such a melting pot. And then I would leave, and one of my best friends in New York is South Asian, and he was like, I don't know anyone else that knows as many brown people as you. And he was like, why do you know so many like Desi people? And I'm like, I grew up in Fremont. And it was just this sort of thing where I was interacting with so many cultures and learning about culture in a way where it wasn't spoon-fed. It was just, we are who we are, we're 13. And all of those cultural backgrounds and the way we saw the world informed our friendships and informed the houses we went to and the food we ate. And so, it impacted the way I see the world and the way I see myself too. And so, but it wasn't until I left and that I realized growing up in such a multicultural place like Fremont and the Bay Area just at large is kind of a rarity. And so I think, certainly it informed the feature film in a very, very visceral way, but I think it's shaped who I am as a person. A lot of my friends are, children of immigrants, and, it informs the conversations we have, and it informs the stories you want to tell, and it informs how we tell the stories you want to tell. So I don't think I could put a word to what it has shaped me, but it's in my DNA. I can't take it out of me.
I'm going to open up to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have someone with a mic, so right here in the middle. There's a mic.
First of all, I'm very resentful that you did not give out Kleenexes. I cried the whole entire time and may start crying again. So one of the things that I was talking to a friend about was, I'm 1.5 generation. My father was a lieutenant colonel of the South Korean Army, kidnapped during when North Korea invaded South Korea when he was 16 years old. And there's a lot of trauma, a lot of violence that then got passed down, and when he died 3 years ago, this is where I'm going to cry because his anniversary is coming up. One thing that is very different from your grandmother's and my dad was that he didn't have a joy. And I'm just curious, how did they find that? Because it sounds like they had a really tough life as well. And I'm just curious, how did they find that joy and that happiness?
Thank you for sharing that with me. Well, I mean, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think a lot of it, Nai Nai says it too, a lot of it for them, I think, comes from family. Realizing that, to quote Nai Nai in the movie, but just like if I die in the next year or two, I just want to spend time with you guys. And I think it goes back to that idea that I think when I'm around, there was this sort of feeling that they brought out of me and I brought out of them. So ultimately, I think that is what this film is about too. about family and kind of holding your loved ones close. And I think one thing we learned making this movie, or I learned making this movie, was like sharing space doesn't mean spending time with somebody. You know, I think I was living at home with them for a really long time, but I also got caught up in the rhythms of the things that I had to do, and was still working and on my phone and stuff. And just because I was in the same room as my family doesn't mean I was actually engaging with them in a way that was present or meaningful. And I think one thing I've realized too about like my identity as a filmmaker is so linked to my identity as a human, and my humanness with my family is as a grandson, as a son. There's these sort of identities that I have in family dynamics. But as a filmmaker, you just have to engage on a human level, otherwise the projects you make are gonna fall flat, they're not gonna be honest. And so, you know, I think talking to them and getting to kind of hear about the painful childhoods that they had, I think so much of the joy now comes from, yeah, they had such a painful childhood and they got through it, and in these sort of late stages of life when things are better and they're surrounded by their family members, they're surrounded, you know, I was home with them, they lived with their you know, son and daughter, and my sister is nearby, they have nieces, or I have nieces, they have great-grandchildren. I think that to them is joy. And so I think yeah, when we're nearby, I think it definitely brings that out of them.
Sean, I have two questions. First,
Oh, can you wait for 1 second? We're gonna get a microphone so everyone can hear you.
So first, what was your grandma's reaction when they saw the film for the first time? And two, what did you learn when you shot this film on your grandmother's that you didn't know about your grandma's?
Great question. I mean, I think it went back to the idea of why we should, to help them, to make them feel seen in a way that I think, you know, definitely culture and society hadn't, I felt like, seen people like them. I think the first time they saw it, they were like, we feel too seen. They were like, too many close-ups. We would like remove some of the wrinkles. They were like, this is their words. They're like, it's a great movie, but we're so ugly. I was like, whoa, no, like, beautiful. You guys are so beautiful, so complex and human, and alive and youthful. They're everything. But yeah, that was their first reaction. They were like, oh, so many wrinkles.
They're on Disney Plus, so they're
They're Disney princesses. I don't think we can officially coin that, but sorry, Marjan. But yeah, I think what I learned, I mean, I learned so much about them. You know, I think going back to bridging that gap between the identities that we hold in family dynamics, I think in my everyday life, like with probably like people like Masashi, or like my friends, you know, even strangers who I connect with on a human level through like film and art, I am kind of, I'm easily vulnerable, and I'm able to kind of see eye to eye and open up to people in a way that I can't with my family. Not in a way that is at least easy for me. It's kind of a challenge. And so I think as you know, that's so much of this late coming of age. It's seeing your mother before she was your mom and realizing, you know, she is so much more complex than just this mother who raised me. She had a history. She was a person before she was my mother, and kind of wanting to see them in these sort of complex three-dimensional ways. And I think so much of my 20s was seeing every single family member that way, like wanting to break out of this mold as, oh, I am your son, I am your grandson, I am your brother. It's like, oh, you have so many things about you that I don't know, because I'm your little brother, like because there is this gulf. And I think filmmaking allows me to have an infrastructure that lets me ask the hard questions and lets me show them that I have this vulnerability that I want to open up with you guys, but I can't at the dinner table. That's just not our relationship, but I want to get there. And so I think with my grandmothers, it was that, you know, it was, hey, obviously the skits and that stuff were kind of engaging as grandson, grandmother, silliness, but when it came to the pain of their lives and the really hard, you know, that was hard for me to listen to also, but I think we kind of had to level on a human, you know, in a very human way of like, look, you're the biographer of your own story. It's gonna be painful for you to say this. I did cry listening to it as we were interviewing them, but ultimately, if we don't record this, like, you're the biographer of your own story, and this is how you lose culture. This is how you lose history. And so, like, we don't have to talk about this every day. Obviously, I'm not gonna make you relive it for 2 hours every day when we eat dinner. But let's do this and let's really talk about it. And I want to get to know you in that way. And so I think that infrastructure of filmmaking allows me to tell them that in a way that I think it's hard for me to do in my day-to-day life.
Other questions? We have one right here. Oh, right here, yeah.
So Sean, I'm just curious, how have your parents reacted to this? Because I ask that because often dynamics skip generations, so I'm sure that your dynamic with your grandmothers are very different from what your parents know of them, and they probably learned things about their own mothers that they weren't even aware of. So how did they react?
It's funny, because they live with my parents, and so I think the things that I was seeing that I was like, I want to capture this, I want this memory, this image, them washing the dishes, them reading the newspaper, them folding the laundry. These are images that when I was living with them, they're like so vivid and ingrained in my memory. I want to just trap that in amber and have it forever. I remember when the movie premiered at South by, and it was being well received, and my mom was like, "Why do people like this movie?" She was like, "What's so special about it?" And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, I don't know. I don't see what's so special about it. And I'm like, their lives just like, I guess I just see it every day, so I don't see anything new. I guess people like, but I think as the movie found its audience, she was able to kind of, zoom out a little bit and see it from an audience's point of view. But I remember her first reaction was, "The movie's nice, nothing new."
There's a question. I'm sorry to make you go all the way to the back, but there's a question back there.
As a Taiwanese American that was raised by my grandmother, she passed away when I was in college, and I didn't have a chance to say thank you to her. So I'd like to say thank you to you for making this film. But I also wanted to ask you, what was the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself in making this film?
Public therapy. About myself. These are great questions. Truly, I've done a lot of press now, and everyone's asking the same question. It feels like autopilot, but this is like really thoughtful, challenging questions. I really appreciate it. I think going back to what I said before, that there's so much noise in the world. There's so much, you look at your phones and there's like a million different universes that you just get lost in, and that's so easy to do next to your loved ones when you're with your loved ones. And I think that was, the hope with this movie too, and people watch it, it's like you spend 17 minutes with these two and you experience, hopefully, like an entire lifetime's worth of what they experience, and you feel all these emotions that are very human emotions. You really get hopefully a spectrum of the human experience watching this film. That was our hope, because they're very complex human beings with deep human emotions. And you only get that if you're present and you kind of push away the noise. And so I think that's kind of what I learned about myself, is that, like, especially with filmmaking too, is there's so much being so, like, shutting everything out and then promoting it and, like, being a part of the noise, in a weird way. And so I think for myself, I just kind of learned that I need to be present more. It's hard in today's day and age to just kind of like really be here without thinking of the 7 other things you need to be doing. Yeah.
Just to the question, or to the feedback about noise too, I think it's really interesting. What it makes me appreciate this short even more is knowing that shot in kind of COVID, there's the anti-Asian hate that's happening, and although there's some lines of like, this world is kind of, there's a lot going on in the newspaper, you don't add all those elements, but it's almost magical realism, it's escapism, it's spending time with them and removing all the context of that time frame in the world, you know, so I really appreciate that. Other questions? We have a question right here.
Cardio.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're getting your calories.
Hi, Sean. First of all, I'd like to say you're so lucky that you get to spend time with your grandparents, because being a daughter of immigrant parents, I never got much time to spend with my grandmothers because they were both overseas, one in Europe and one in Asia. So enjoy all that time that you can. And then, my question is, now that you finished the project, what would you have done differently? Like, you know, with your grandmothers, like, ask them to do anything different, or would you have done it exactly the way you did it?
I don't think I would have done anything. I definitely wouldn't have changed anything about the process. I think the process was incredibly special and meaningful, and I wish I could keep that feeling in like a, you know, bottle to have forever. Certainly, I watched the movie and I'm like, maybe we could have cut a few frames there. But I think what I did with this movie and what I will continue to do with, I think I did it on the feature film too, was before the movie premiered at South by Southwest, before you know, it went out on Disney Plus. I mean, there's sort of this interesting period of like, you show the movie in increments, different audiences, but before we premiered it at South by, I really sat with the movie and like journaled and asked myself, did this movie do what we wanted it to do? You know, what's my relationship with the movie? Before South by Southwest or audiences say, your movie is amazing, it should be nominated for an Oscar, or your movie sucks, this movie is so boring. I really asked myself, like, why did we make this? Did we accomplish what we set out to do? And I think ultimately, again, it went back to that idea of home videos, you know, like, at the end of the day, I think Sam and I, you know, we kind of have this shared, I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but I really do believe that that's why we made this movie. And I think if you told us 2.5, 3 years ago when we shot it, like, hey, by the way, nobody is gonna watch this movie except you, your grandmothers, your family, your nieces. Like 10 people are gonna watch it, and Masashi. We would have still made the movie, because ultimately, like, you take away all the shiny things that have happened to it. It's for my grandmothers, it's for my family, it's for my children. Because I do think about that now, you know, like, still, like, watching this kind of has become a time capsule, but I still feel their fragility, even through the joy and, like, the celebration. That, like, in the next, you know, few years, they may not be here, so, yeah.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions right here.
I was just, so many wonderful conversations. It started with a fart and then the death. Like, did you guide them, or was it just organic? And were there other conversations that were equally interesting that you didn't include? Like, how did you choose those 2 narratives?
I don't know if the farting the narrative. I mean, I think it really it always went back to the personal. You know, my grandma farts a lot. I don't know. And so it was kind of like, we should. I mean, I didn't. You know, the interview was sort of. I can't remember exactly the questions I asked, but it really was just, I think when you interview someone in a documentary setting, you're you're really just giving them like a layup, you know, to talk about the things they want to talk about. And so those are the things that kind of naturally came out from an interview setting. And then obviously there's some scenes that are a little bit more staged, and in those settings it was almost like fly on the wall narrative filmmaking, where Sam and I would almost just like roll the like they would kind of start going to sleep, and then we would kind of like roll the camera and just like kind of leave. And then, you know, there's like, we probably have so much footage of just like 15 minutes of them sitting there. It's like, should they talk? Really special. I want to just keep rolling. And then every so often, you know, just say like, what do you guys talk about like before you go to sleep? You know, it wasn't like talk about farts. It was just like, you know, do you guys talk before, like when you guys get in, like, do you have pillow talk? And so it was just kind of asking questions. Even like when we were shooting those types of scenes where it was a little bit more narrative, it was always about questions instead of telling them like, hey, talk about farts. And I think ultimately like it still feels organic to me because it was like led by questions and not prompts.
I'm glad that farts came up in this conversation. I do want to ask a question about Didi, but before that, maybe one last question from the audience. Oh gosh, it's so hard. Maybe right here with the scarf, because someone's pointing.
Thank you. This film is wonderful.